Now then, in these different runs, there was certainly, in a model, you have to put in how much pumping there's going to be, right? So you put in how much pumping there is, and in the model you have to put where it's going to be. Now that is very, very much speculative, very, very much speculation as to where the pumping is going to be in 50 years. Okay, we kind of know where it might be because we know where the aquifer is thick, we know where it's deep, we know where it's productive, we know where the best pumping should be. But we don't know exactly on a well by well or even a square mile by square mile basis where that pumping is going to be. It's very speculative for the future. That's very important, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. In the various model files that we've seen, there are not significant changes in where the pumping is modeled. Does that make sense? Where the pumping is modeled, there are not a lot of changes. There are changes in how much pumping there is at those spots. Okay? And the timing, the location, and boundaries of the model are that significantly impact the modeled effects or the outputs of the model. Let me say it another way. When you use a model, there's one thing I forgot to say earlier. Based on the geometry of the aquifers, by that I mean where their outcrop occurs, how big their outcrop is, or narrow it is, and then the dip of the aquifer and how it's shallow up here and deep down here. Based on the geometry of the aquifer and based on the structure of the GAMs, the DFCs, the average drawdown DFCs used by the GMA are essentially measurements of or calculations, of artesian drawdown. Okay, the outcrop is not considered very much at all in these models, and so and just based on where the pumping is, how the aquifers are shaped, the geometry of the aquifers, the structure of the GAMs, we are looking at artesian water level declines. Now then, when considering artesian drawdown, the amount and location of drawdown is inextricably tied to the precise location, amount, and timing of pumping. Okay, it's very, very tied together. As soon as you take in a model or in real life, you take where you would pump and move it to another spot, it changes the calculation. So that speculation of where pumping is going to be in 50 years is very important, because if you take it and say it was going to be here and now it's going to be there, then that DFC number could change. Okay? Also related to that, how close are these wells to a fault? How close are the wells to an outcrop? If it's close to a fault, is the fault really restricting flow? If a fault restricts flow, there's more drawdown next to the fault. If a fault doesn't restrict flow as much, there's less drawdown. The GAMs that were used have a very restrictive flow across faults, so they calculate more drawdown near faults. Do we know that that occurs? Nope. In fact, the only evidence that we know of shows that it does not occur that much. So we'll talk about that in a minute. This will illustrate a little bit of the arbitrary nature of where the well files and the amount of pumping that were in the models. GMA, the GAM layer 5 is Corrizo Aquifer. This is, whoops, wrong button, there we go. This is the original well file. We call it out of the box. When you call the Water Development Board, before all the DFC runs, just the Queen City Sparta GAM, before all the DFC runs were done, we call it out of the box model. You call them up, call the Water Development Board, say, hey, we want the model, we want the files. This is what they give you. This is the location of pumping in the Corrizo Aquifer. You'll notice a whole lot of small amount of pumping in Bastrop County, and some bigger amounts, but not so much there in, excuse me, that's Bastrop County, Lee County. And then you see some in Brazos County. okay? And then the GMA 12-7B, the DFC run, has this distribution of pumping in it, okay? Now, this slide illustrates the difference, excuse me, the difference between the two. So, if you can see the kind of the color code here, anything that's that color green is really between there and there. There's really not a lot of difference. Okay, that color, this green. As you get to the yellows and the reds, you see a significant decrease in the amount of pumping from the original GAM to the GMA 12-7B or the DFC GAM. Here comes the train. So you see significant reduction in Bastrop County. In Lee County, excuse me, it's a little bit in Bastrop County. In the rest of the area, the pumping kind of stays pretty much close to the same. Okay. He's going slow. I'll try to talk over it. All right, let's go to layer 7, which is the Simsboro. Again, here's, I keep hitting the wrong button, here we go. There's the original well file. You can see some major pumping areas in the original well file. There's probably Blue Water, I think. There's Bryan College Station, probably. Alcoa. There's Bastrop County. I don't know what that is. There's some. This actually came from. The first time I ever saw this was in the 1999 Bureau of Economic Geology Corrizo-Wilcox model. It was I can't remember how big it was, but it was a 20,000 acre foot or something project that was in there. I don't think it's in the state water plan. I don't think, is it in the state water plan? We don't believe it's in the state water plan. So it's a project, it's somewhere in Lee County of Simsboro pumping. Again, here is the model file from GAM 12-7B, and then here are the differences. Again, if you look at the kind of the greens and there's not a lot of difference. The blue is a large increase in pumping. So you see an increase here and here. That'd be Roberson County, probably associated with the mine, I believe. The mining that goes on in Roberson County. And you talk about speculative. We work at that mine. And they have no plans as of now to increase pumping out that far. In fact, their pumping has been reduced over the last 10 years. So, then you have increases in the mining area as well as in Milam and Milam County, and then probably again Blue Water in the Post Savannah district. And again, this is still there. I guess those are decreases, aren't they? Yes. Okay. Those are decreases. That's decreases. Those are increases here. Those are decreases here. So Alcoa is shutting down a little bit. This one went away in the GAM file. Okay. So that's where the pumping came from. The pumping files came from. Now then, the GMA 12 reverse engineering. Desired future conditions were described by Dr. Mace as, what do you want your aquifer to look like in 50 years? Okay, that's a broad question. A lot of answers to that one. So, what was done in GMA 12 was basically to take preset amounts of pumping in preset areas and say, this is how much pumping we want, what's going to be the drawdown afterwards. Okay, and this is, we'll show you some quotes later as to how we know that's true. Okay, so instead of looking at overall groundwater availability and saying how much water can this aquifer produce, and if we produce this much, what will happen, or if we produce this much, what will happen, if we produce this much, what will happen, what was done is we only want this much to be produced. What's that drawdown going to be? So it was a reverse engineered, a back calculated number that was described kind of like this, where you have a desired maximum production, starting with the end result, going and looking and modifying the well files, run the model. That spits out a drawdown, which becomes the DFC. The DFC gets spit back to the Texas Water Development Board, and they calculate a MAG. Okay? What that process, really, you could just get rid of that, and that in how the process was run. The process was really run like that. The desired maximum production is the MAG. There was no reason for the Texas Water Development Board to run the MAG because it was already set in advance by the GMA. There is no evidence, no indication that the GMA looked at how much water is truly available from this aquifer. Now then, we have explicit examples of prescribed production, preset production. These are quotes from each district's documentation of how they arrived at their pumping amounts for their DFCs. The Mid-East Texas Groundwater Conservation District says, the district board decided to raise the total district pumping to 25,000 acre-feet per year and to rerun the model to determine DFCs based on that pumping amount. That right there is the cart before the horse. Period. Black and white. Blue and white. Again, they decided to raise the pumping amount and then decided to say, what's that DFC? Okay? Instead of, here's what we want the aquifer water levels to be, how much pumping is that? It's just backwards. The Lost Pines District, no currently existing or pending non-exempt well permits in Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District were specifically used to determine the LPGCD's DFC numbers. Same thing. We have a set amount of pumping, what's the drawdown? Rather than, if this much drawdown occurs, how much water can we pump? Okay. Now there's another example that I'll read you from Lost Pines. This is from their letter dated May 26, 2010. It says, these estimates of future demands are largely related to entities that already withdraw groundwater from within the district. Out-of-district transfers or speculative demands included in the 2007 State Water Plan. Demand estimates compose a relatively small amount of the estimated pumpage. No amount of demand was allocated for potential water marketers beyond that in the state's demand estimates. No currently existing or pending non-exempt well permits in the LPGCD were specifically used to determine the numbers. So they specifically had a set amount of pumping set aside rather than to look at the possibility of how much the aquifer can produce and still remain healthy.